Welcome to our April webinar. My name is Tracy, and I'm part of the team that puts together these monthly webinars where we connect farmers with top industry experts to tackle a new challenge on the farm. We focus on actual strategies that can have a direct impact on farm productivity and profitability. Today we're going to talk about how farmers can use weather data, and more specifically soil moisture data, historic precipitation levels, and actual in-season precipitation, all to make data-driven in-season decisions to match yield goals to available moisture. The end result? Optimizing water and nutrient use efficiency and, in the end, to drive farm profits. This is a great question to begin with. Why does weather data matter? As farmers move further and further into precision management, a big part of this is being able to identify and target areas of your field that are underperforming. And this is where understanding water becomes very helpful. Each point along this spectrum is important, but we're going to focus on this section in the middle and why water plays such a crucial role in the in-season decisions farmers are making. Now we're going to move on to the meat of this webinar and introduce the two Trimble Ag experts we turn to because of their deep knowledge on this important topic. First, we're going to hear from Elston Solberg, who is a senior agri-coach with the AgriTrend network. He brings over 25 years of research experience to this role. Elston has traveled extensively and has trained people on almost every continent about various facets of crop production, soil science, and nutrient management. After Elston, we're going to hear from Brian Stark. Brian lives with his family on a working farm near Edgerton, Ohio. He has farming in his blood, but what makes Brian uniquely qualified is that he's also been specializing in farm management software for the past 20 years. So a bit later in this webinar, Brian is going to give us a demo in Trimble Ag software so we can actually see how the weather data shows up in the software. Now let's turn to Elston, who's really known for his deep agronomic expertise on the subject of water. Elston starts with the basics, and that's really that there are two sources of water that we care about here, soil water and precipitation, which he says are equally important in determining crop yields, but farmers typically put too high an emphasis on precipitation and don't pay enough attention to the moisture already present in the soil. According to Elston, water is the most deficient nutrient in dryland agriculture, and that's really why water drives everything, whether it's too little or too much. A term you'll hear Elston use in this webinar is the factory, which is really the plant. So it takes 4 inches of water just to grow the plant. It's a little bit more for corn. And then every inch after that goes to adding bushels, and how many depends on a number of other factors, including the crop type, soil texture, and a big one is how carefully the farmer is monitoring his crop and the soil moisture. So Elston's goal here is to help farmers identify yield opportunities and predict yield potential weeks before harvest, which allows you to pull triggers or take actions during the season that can result in tremendous benefits to ROI. Now we're going to turn it over to Elston, who begins with a great explanation of the opportunity available to farmers if they can get a really good handle on plant available water in their fields.
There's a huge opportunity here if we actually can figure out a simple way to measure water in the soil and to watch the amount of water that falls out of the sky, and then use that information relative to the crops we're growing, the grower's capability and the field's capability. There is massive opportunity for us to help growers make their decisions in season and to be much more profitable. So there's two sources of water: soil, precipitation, okay, irrigation. But here's the rub: nobody measures it. Nobody really knows what's in the soil. Nobody really knows what's falling out of the sky. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows what 30-year normals are. And all of that information can be easily obtained and can be easily updated. And here's an example of a grower that I'm working with, fall soil sampling to 18 inches, and we've got over 3 inches in most cases, or close to 3 inches in most cases in the top 18 inches, which tells me that there's virtually the entire factory for the crops we grow already existing in the soil. So if you know you have the factory already existing in the soil and you have some semblance of knowledge of what you can expect that's going to fall out of the sky from the time you took the soil sample to the end of the growing season, now you have a foundation upon which you can base quite confidently yield potential, and then structure your fertility programs and management systems to attain that possibility. If the rainfall precipitation is greater than normal, then you have higher yield potential. If you know that in enough time, you can pull triggers. If the yield potential is less than normal, then you have other decisions to make. And this year, many of the dry areas where we're seeing these high yields with low rainfall, we're sitting on a ton of soil available water. And for those of us that are lucky enough to be measuring it either through soil sampling or through moisture sensors or through brown moisture probes, or however we're doing it, having seances in the middle of the field and communicating to the water gods, however we're doing it, it's a very, very valuable tool. So here's the easiest way to do it, and I've been talking about this for, well, over 20 years. So one of these days it might catch on. So whether it's a moisture probe, a soil test that measures water, a brown moisture probe walking across fields, a soil auger that experienced irrigation managers use, whatever the methodology that we can utilize to get some read on the amount of water that's in the soil is a good thing. And the irony is nobody in the industry, maybe 1% of the industry actually does this. Soil water is just as important to a crop as is precipitation at the end of the day. And for most of us that are growing annual crops, with the exception of maybe corn, corn, the baseline is 4 inches of water grows the factory. Corn will be more like 6 or 7, and then every inch after that goes to yield. And every inch after the factory goes to yield in a manner that is dependent on the grower's capability and the field's capability. So if you got a moisture probe, no matter what it is, and a little bit of understanding of how soil holds water, and in this case, we have different textures of soil, you can convert that to cation exchange capacity, whatever lingo you want to use, you can get a sense as to how much water a soil can hold. So I'll give you an example here near Kalmar, Alberta. We're kind of close to where I live now. Soils this spring were wet to about 4 feet. Most of the soils are either loam to silt, loam to depth. So if you know you have wet soil to 4 feet and you know the texture of your soil down the profile and you know how much water, crop available water that soil can hold, you can see from the graph here, 4 feet times 2 1/4 inches is about 9 inches. And if you got 9 inches of crop available water in the soil at seeding time, you've got the factory plus a whole bunch of yield before you even get one drop out of the sky. So we're seeing, 100 bushel wheat crops, 140 bushel barley crop, 80, 90 bushel canola crop on 7 to 8 inches of water. The piece that you need to pull together with that water, of course, and I've already alluded to it, is different crops have different yield potential per inch of crop available water after the factory's built. And so this information embodied in this graph, regionalized, is where the rubber hits the road. Here's invaluable data. This is for Regina. You can get this for probably anywhere on the planet. And for Canadian growers, we have 30-year normals, and we could argue a little bit about climate change and a whole bunch of other stuff, but 30-year normal data for precipitation is a really, really good foundation from which to work. So where I grew up in Riley, Alberta, we can expect to get 18 inches of precipitation in any given year. Right off the hop, knowing what the annual precipitation is, 18 inches in that part of the world is a lot different than 24 inches in the Edmonton area. And so you can almost start providing a baseline yield potential based on water-driven yield capability off of annual precipitation. The truth is, most people do not know what the annual precipitation in their area is. And they'll be more concerned about arguing that, oh yeah, well, 14 of it is rain and 5 of it is snow, and snow might melt and won't go in, and all the nuances. But at the end of the day, water is water, whether it's rain, hail, snow, sleet, whatever it is. It gives you a really good baseline of what your water-driven yield potential is, just those numbers. And then within these data sets, you can drill down into what can I expect during the growing season, what can I expect in May, June, July, August, and come up with some really, really good numbers upon which to hedge your bets towards better quality and better yield. And nobody does it. So let's start doing it. So water drives everything. How much water is there in 1 inch per acre? Well, the answer is there's 24,000 Canadian gallons. That's about 240,000 pounds. And most people don't know this, and most people, as I mentioned earlier, don't know how many pounds of water, how many gallons, how many whatever of water it takes to grow anything. And that's a really, really good place to start. And so on average, just as an example, 50,000 pounds grow a bushel of wheat, 67,000 pounds to grow a bushel of canola, 34,000 pounds to grow a bushel of corn, and I could keep going. And so those are pretty foundational pieces of information that we could utilize to help people understand how important water is to grow stuff and how we need to balance other things with that water. So it's not a complicated formula. Again, there's only 2 sources of water, is in the soil and the stuff that falls out of the sky, whether it's a rainfall or an irrigation event. First 4 inches of crop available water goes to the factory. So that can come from both of those locations, and then every inch after that goes to yield. If we have some sense for specific crops' ability to grow yield per inch, if we have some sense of the grower's capability, if we have some sense of the field's capability, then we can use this information almost on a day-by-day basis to predict where our yield potential is going to, and we can make in-season decisions that either protect that yield or enhance that yield. And in the case of dry season where we don't have substantial soil moisture, we can make other decisions relative to inputs, fungicides, insecticides, et cetera, that are also very financially powerful.
Thank you, Elston, for walking us through the key reasons to track water and how farmers can make in-season decisions based on that data. Now I want to draw your attention to something Elston calls the real kicker for the future. In this slide, you'll see water-driven yield potential is shown in 3 different lines. The yellow line represents a situation where your field has had a higher amount of precipitation than expected. So the decision might be to add more inputs because your yield potential is going to be higher. The blue line in the middle is where actual precipitation is tracking very closely to expected precipitation. So your original yield goal should stand. The green line below indicates in-season precipitation is lower than expected, in which case the decision might be made to apply less inputs, keeping that money in your pocket, given that your yield potential has dropped in that zone of the field. So as you can see from this slide, where water-driven yield potential really determines the future is when it intersects with variable rate precision management. Many farmers are beginning to manage different parts of their fields differently based on yield potentials that are supported by soil samples, tissue analysis, variable rate nutrition, fungicide, that kind of thing. Precision management is the new norm, and water-driven yield potential is very important to widespread adoption of precision management strategies. So now let's answer the question, how do I get started? First, determine historic rainfall amounts for the growing season. And then you want to figure out the crop available water in the soil. And then calculate water-driven yield potential using the formula Elston outlined in the presentation. Then you want to measure rainfall with a rain gauge or start playing with weather stations. They're cheap, reliable, and the telematics is not the problem that it used to be. Larger farms may need several stations. Trimble Ag Software's Ag Premium Weather provides accumulated rainfall plus the historical average. Fifth, you want to adjust inputs based on how well water-driven yield potential is tracking to actual precipitation. Now we're going to go into the Ag Premium Weather software to show you firsthand what it looks like when you're tracking all of this data. And now I'll turn it over to Brian.
Like Tracy said, my name is Brian Stark, and I've been with Trimble for quite a few years, and before Trimble, with FarmWorks software. So for a total of well over 20 years of software experience. What I want to do today is show you ag premium weather and what it's all about and what it can do for you. So you've been listening to some experts, and now I want to try to apply some of this to real life. So to get started here, I'm going to go to the farm menu and go to farm weather. Okay, so the first thing that we see is temperature trends. So the temperature trend shows basically a map of temperature in this case. And if I want to make a switch from temperature to, let's say, precipitation trends, since that's what we're talking about with this webinar, basically just hitting that drop-down list, it will change the map from temperature to precipitation. And to give you a quick background of what we're looking at here, the northern part of this farm, we've got a couple of fields north of Hamilton, and we have a couple of fields down here by Edgerton. So we're definitely kind of spread out here, which is probably pretty typical to most farms out there. But I'm sure you farm maybe miles away, and some fields are small, maybe a couple acres, and other fields might be 300-400 acres. So I know everyone has a wide range of field sizes here, and that's kind of what we're looking at. So with this map, we can see that the northern part of my fields had about 1/10 of an inch, and down south we had almost a half an inch. So ag premium weather defaults to the last 2 weeks. And we can easily change that by hitting the drop down here. And maybe for this example, we want to look at some historical data for that field. We'll take a look at June 1st to June 30th. So we're going to look at June 2017 and see what the weather looked like last year for that month. Hit the refresh button. Okay, great. So if we scroll back down to that farm, we can see that that we had a whole lot of rain just in the middle of this area between our farm. Actually, it missed most of our fields, so we had about almost 5 inches of rain in June. But unfortunately, only 2.5 inches hit the fields in the north and south. So as you can see, there's a lot of rainfall variability, and this software is going to show that. Going to the top here, oops. Let me kind of zoom to the top here a little bit. All right, so if we look at the bars here and what they mean, if I just put my cursor over June 23rd, we can see we had almost 1 inch of rain, and back on June 13th, we had almost a half an inch of rain. And the graph here is showing us historical information for the month of June, and so for the entire month of June, we usually have about 4 inches of rain. And our particular farm had only 3.2 inches of rain, so almost 1 inch difference historically of rainfall. So our crops were suffering a bit back in June, and this is going to give you that information and kind of show you that on a map by map basis. Now, if we want to actually change this up a little bit here, we can go to Jump to Field in the upper left-hand corner and pick out our field name, Stark number 1. So not only can you view it from a overall farm basis, but we can also view it on a field by field basis. All right, so that Stark number 1 field, we can kind of zoom, I guess, down to the bottom here, and you'll see there's been a little bit of variability, not much, but the most of the field had 0.44 inches, and the corner here had 0.46. So not much variability really at all, but a lot of times you will see a lot of variability on your fields, and so that's what's really cool about ag premium weather, is that it's going to give you that information. It's kind of like having a million rain gauges in your field. And those rain gauges, converting rain gauges to maps is what we're doing. And so you can quickly view that field by field. If you do any kind of irrigation on your field, you'd know exactly how much rainfall that you had in each part of the field, and be able to make key decisions from that data. So that's putting information really at your fingertips, so that way you can make decisions on irrigation, or in my case, we know exactly where the rainfall was. Our fields are scattered around. We know that maybe the northern part of the fields had more rain, versus the south. So maybe we deploy more farm equipment to the south versus the north. And this gets really important for harvest. So harvest time, we're always looking at the fields that are, obviously had less rain so we can harvest. So this information is going to have that at your fingertips by logging into your account or getting our daily emails or looking at the Trimble Ag mobile app on your smartphone. You're going to have access to all those maps at any time you want. The emails are really awesome, by the way. So every time you have a rain event, you're going to get that information emailed to you, and that way you can consume it that way. Or in my case, I use the smartphone a lot because it's always with me. So that's one way of looking at it from a field-by-field basis. I like to kind of sum up my presentation here by bringing up a PowerPoint slide. And so this is just a recap of what we've been talking about here. So I really enjoyed showing you the color-coded contour maps, and that's really a key feature here of Ag Premium Weather, to view those maps from a farm bird eye view, or by zooming down to any field at any time and viewing the variability on a field-by-field basis. Really, no one else does that better than Trimble. Being able to access that from your mobile app, which is very key, and again, eliminating all that expensive on-site weather stations or data plans for tracking weather. This is going to eliminate any physical rain gauge that you might be using right now. And my last point for this presentation is basically talking about hail alerts, because hail alerts is very critical in the summertime, and the software will send you an email when you do have a hail alert. And what you're looking at here on the screen is an example of that, showing us the amount of hail, and you can see that the red area with the yellow kind of around that even, but the red area is really the danger area where we probably had some hail damage in our field. So instead of us just randomly driving fields and seeing if we had hail damage, we could take our mobile app out to the field, do some scouting, look at this information here, and have a starting point to look for fields that had hail damage. So those are my key points for really leveraging weather information and making key decisions from it. I hope you all enjoyed it. I enjoyed showing you the different parts of the software. I hope that you keep watching webinars every month. We have different topics and different presenters, and so I think you will get a lot of great value from these presentations. So thank you all for joining, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you to everyone for joining us on this webinar. If you would like more information, or if you have questions that we didn't answer, please call or email us, or you can fill out the form located at the bottom of this page and we'll be happy to help. Finally, be sure to come back to watch our May webinar, when we'll be talking to an industry expert on the power of using satellite imagery as an early warning system to monitor your crop's health throughout the growing season. Thanks again, and see you back here in May.